Hello, happy Sunday, and welcome to the Pandemic Fan of Happy Hour. Today's class is called Whiskey Sour Me Away. If you don't like puns, you should probably be on a different channel as of right now. I will be using a lot of puns today. I'll be using a lot of whiskey, and I'll just be making some very interesting things. At least I find them interesting. Whiskey sour is probably one of my favorite cocktails to make, just because it's very versatile. It's a really good way to showcase a bunch of different whiskeys. It's very agreeable to many different palates. So it's a good cocktail to have around when you have people that aren't maybe avid whiskey drinkers or whiskey or cocktail drinkers, because it's easy. It's an easy, sippable cocktail. Now, that being said, there's lots of variations, lots of different styles. So today's class, I'll be presenting 3 different whiskey sours that each represent one of the styles of whiskey sour that I like. So the 3 whiskey sours that I consume the most, there'd be just your classic whiskey sour, which would be a sweetener, a citrus, and whiskey. And then there's the variation with egg white. Follows the same exact format as the first one, but you add in that egg white. I love egg white cocktails. I do them very often on this channel. But I really enjoy egg white cocktails because it, first of all, looks super fancy. Second of all, I love the texture. And when you use certain ingredients, the egg white can really trap a lot of aromas, which is really, really pleasant. And then the ever famous New York sour, which is a whiskey sour with a red wine float on top. And I adore New York sours. I find them to be very, very interesting. I love the way the drink evolves. So I'll be doing a cocktail to represent each one of those. So we'll just go ahead and get started. We're going to start with one that is the egg white version whiskey sour. And I'm calling this Maize your glass because I'm adding a lot of corn stuff into this cocktail. Now, I could have gone with bourbon, which is classically what's used in a lot of whiskey sours, but I decided to go with a rye to really counteract some of the sweet notes that I'm bringing in addition with all the corn products that I'm going to be adding to this cocktail. So for this cocktail, you will need a shaker. And I will go ahead and say that usually I don't advocate that you have to have a specific spirit for a cocktail that I build. But on occasion, certain things work really, really, really well together. So I love telling you guys what I'm using, not necessarily because I'm sponsored, but because I don't use products I don't like. And second, if you are trying to recreate exactly what I'm doing here, then you'll be able to get the exact same flavor profile. So I did try this with a couple of different rye whiskeys. However, the one that I found that worked the best was the Woodford Reserve Kentucky Straight Rye Whiskey. Goes without saying, Woodford Reserve is very well known, very popular, and oh so tasty. But we're going to use a full 2-ounce pour of their rye. And I'm going to just go ahead and pour it in my shaker. And then there's a couple different ways you could go about this particular cocktail. This has about a tablespoon of actual corn kernels in it that are going to get kind of mushed around. Now, if you wanted to, you could add them and now muddle them into the whiskey to really extract more flavor. I didn't find that to be entirely necessary. I felt like a really good vigorous shake did the trick. So I'm going to just go ahead with the rest of my liquid ingredients. So we have the 2 ounces of Woodford rye. And then I'm going to do a 3/4 ounce of lemon juice. And if you haven't been here before, fresh squeeze is the way to go. Those bottled ones have that little aftertaste from being pasteurized and other processes that they go through. Fresh is best whenever possible, but if you can't find it, use what you have on hand. Then we'll be using corn products. So on the prep list that I released earlier this week for this particular class, there's a recipe that I actually use in a couple cocktails that I make, and it's a syrup based on corn husks. Now, I love corn, and I find it to be a very versatile ingredient. Ooh, we have a visitor today. Watch me not be able to handle having visitors. It's been a minute, but here we go. We're going to try this, guys. So corn is a really interesting product. I feel like a lot of people don't know all of the things you can do with corn. There was a cooking class I did way back last year, mid-pandemic, that explained things that you can use the husks for. You can use them to wrap things like tamales. You can obviously use the kernels for things that are edible. You can use the silk, which is those little threads under the husks, to make tea. And then you can use the cobs if you dry them, and you can add them to your barbecue or your grill and add a little extra layer of depth in the smoke that you might be using for something that you're cooking. So for this cocktail, I'm going to use a 1/2 ounce of the corn husk syrup. I'm going to put that in there. And then I came across recently a corn liqueur out of Mexico. I have a tiny little sample bottle. It's so cute. I wish the sample bottle were the same shape as the actual bottle because the big size bottle is a corn cob and it's corny. I told you they were going to be terrible puns. But the bottle's way cooler than this. So the label's the same, but the bottle's way cooler. So I'm going to use a 1/4 ounce of Nixta corn liqueur. And then I'm going to add in about a tablespoon of fresh corn kernels. Put those right in there. And then, guys, we're going to add that egg white that I love so much. Perfect. All right. So I like to dry shake my egg white cocktails. So I'm going to do a dry shake with no ice. And then I'm going to add in ice to give it that dilution and chill that we need. So I like to shake it for about 10, maybe 15 seconds. If you start to feel the pressure in your shaker really build up to where it feels like it's hard to hold on to, then stop shaking. You definitely don't want it popping up on you and exploding all over your walls. So when you're giving it a healthy jiggle, we're going to add some ice. I'll let this sit right off to the side real quick. Don't worry, it's not going to go bad. I have this little board. This is my little burn board that I use to smoke things. So I have some dried corn cobs here. And you can dry these in your oven. You can dry them out in the sun. But I'm going to light one on fire and smoke it so that I can smoke my glass with corn cob to put the corn cocktail in. A little extra today. So let's see if I remember how to use this. Light this baby on fire. A nice little roast going. Nice amount of smoke. I'm going to just turn my coupe over on top of that and give this a shake. All right. Perfect. Okay. So now with that shaken, I'm gonna take my glass. I don't know if this will actually be caught on camera. Oh, no, but there is smoke, I promise. And then we're gonna strain this cocktail into my corn cob smoked glass. Get as close to that wash line as we can without making it really hard to handle. And then I have this fantastic seared grilled corn piece right there. And that, guys, is Maize your glass. That is tasty. So I did try this with bourbon because it felt like it should go with bourbon because bourbon, obviously corn heavy, corn cocktail, but it was so sweet. And using the rye really gave it a much better backbone, much better flavor profile, in my opinion. But if you don't have it on hand, try it with some bourbon, see what you like. So our next cocktail, also super groany pun, is called Smooth Saline, but saline spelled S-A-L-I-N-E as in saline from salt. This is a salty cocktail. And it's funny because there's not a whole lot of salt added to the cocktail, but the characteristics that come together in this just have a salty vibe to it. It kind of tastes like the way ocean air just has a little bit of salt in it. So I found this Japanese whiskey called Akashi, and it's an ume whiskey, which ume is a plum/apricot that grows in those regions. And they can be very bitter, very tart, and usually they're salted and dried or used to make umeshu, which is a plum wine. So this is a lightly fruity, kind of saline, very mildly sweet, but it does have a little bit of a lower proof than most whiskeys. So most standard whiskeys that you get in the store will be about 40%. This one is a 30.5, so it does have a little bit of a lower proof, but that's okay. It just makes it a lower proof cocktail. I didn't feel the need to add a ton more modifier or more whiskey to up the ABV because the flavor profile works really well. So it's just a lower ABV whiskey sour with all the flavor that you want. So shaker in hand, we are going to use 2 full ounces of this whiskey. Pour that in there. And then yuzu is a really nice citrus from the Asian region primarily of the world. And it's one of my favorite citruses. It's very bright and tart like lemons can be, but it has this really unique flavor profile that's subtle, but has a tiny bit of bitterness in the back that just makes it really appealing. For me, I think it's a fantastic citrus to use in cocktails, but sometimes it can overpower things with the bitter note. So I have made cocktails where I use only yuzu, but in this case, I did a 50-50 blend between yuzu juice and lemon juice. So of that 50-50 blend, I'm going to put a 3/4 ounce here in my jigger, and then there in my cocktail shaker. And then the simple syrup for this cocktail was made with seaweed, guys. So that's kind of where some of this saline quality comes from, but it also comes from the whiskey and tying it all together. So I used 2 different types of seaweed, wakame, which is very well known for being used in miso soup, and kombu, which is traditionally used to season sushi rice. So they look very different from each other. Wakame is like squiggly, looks like crispy wiggles. And then kombu looks like these flat, tiny sheets of cut out dark paper. So I used both of those as a combination and then added them into my syrup. And I'm going to be using a 3/4 ounce of that as well. Pouring that right in there. And then I'm going to add 1 single drop of Peychaud's bitters. And it's just going to bring home some of those flavors in a way that kind of gets tied all together with some of the herbaceous qualities that are in Peychaud's. So it gives it kind of a little extra depth, but what it really does is just kind of be like, hey guys, come on in, let's all be friends and behave together. So with all of those ingredients in there, I'm going to add some ice, as you do. My other cocktail is so full to the wash line that it's like really wanting to spill every time we grab ice now. It's a terrible idea to put it down in. But all right, we're going to give it about a 10, maybe 15-second shake. I'm kind of wondering, I'm going to have to rewatch this afterwards, but I'm pretty sure the last time I said 10 to 15 minute shake, which is insane. So if I did say that, I meant 10 to 15 seconds. If I didn't say that, ignore what I'm saying now. So just right off the bat, when you open the shaker, it smells like ocean air. It's really nice. With like this fruity tone in the background. It's kind of hard to explain. It's definitely a very unique aroma, but I'm going to go ahead and strain that into my glass. Very simple, easy little whiskey sour. And then my garnish is going to be a sail, because it's smooth sailing, guys, that I made from one of those kombu strips. And there you go. Smooth sailing. That's so good. I love this cocktail. It's really hard, I think, to make cocktails that are saline, not savory, not salty, but like saline without killing that particular quality because it's really subtle. So you can add salt to a lot of cocktails. In fact, if you've never done it before and you drink any kind of cocktails with citrus, I always recommend a little pinch of salt while you're shaking it up. Add a pinch of salt into your margarita or into your Paloma, even into your daiquiris, and you will be amazed at how just that tiny, tiny pinch of salt just takes that cocktail to a whole new ballpark. But sometimes there's things that are considered savory, like a Bloody Mary or things like that, and that's not what this is. This is just really bright and fruity with a little bit of saline in the background, but a really nice whiskey backbone too. And it's just overall super tasty. So definitely make this cocktail. And I know it seems crazy with the weird citrus and the seaweed and this like plum whiskey, but I swear it's totally worth it. And this would also make fantastic batches. So that one is more of the classic. We've done the one with egg white. And now we're going to move on to a version of a whiskey sour that's inspired by the New York sour. So sometimes I hit a wall when I'm creating or trying to think up ideas. And I really wanted to make a clarified whiskey sour because I just love how they look. I think it's a very easy profile. flavor-wise to really bring home in a clarified whiskey or in a clarified cocktail. And it's an easy technique. It's just sometimes for you to go through all that trouble and it to be something super complex. I like to keep it simple sometimes if I'm doing a really complex technique. So if you're unfamiliar with a clarified cocktail, you have a base or a cocktail recipe that you mix together, and then you're going to mix it with cream or whole milk. And what will happen is it'll curdle, right? And it sounds terrible. But what you do is you strain it, usually through like a super fine mesh strainer or even a coffee filter, although the filter will absorb some of your liquid and you'll lose a little bit of volume. But you do that, and what it does is it extracts all the solids and perishables that are in the cocktail mix, leaving behind all the flavor and this very clear looking cocktail that's just almost pretty much ready to drink. And you can do it with a lot of things. People have gone crazy and clarified things as crazy as like a Bloody Mary. But I really wanted to do a New York sour look, which has a layered look because of the float of red wine. But I really wanted to do a clarified whiskey sour, and I really wanted to use Irish whiskey because it's not something that comes up very often in whiskey sour conversations. So as I was trying to explore this, I tried different types of wine floats and ideas. I did sherry and I did vermouths, and it just wasn't really working. And then sometimes when I hit a wall, I like to workshop things with my colleagues and my friends that are, whether they're in my vicinity or halfway across the country. But a friend of mine had a fantastic idea about trying to keep it in the family, if you will, with like the Irish whiskey, and then maybe do something Irish as a float, such as a stout, like Guinness, which is very well known. Jameson and Guinness, they go together beautifully, I think. But so what I ended up doing was taking that idea that she gave me, which, by the way, Algie, fantastic idea, because that's what I'm going to do. But I took it a step further and decided that instead of just a stout, I would go with a milk stout because I'm doing a clarified whiskey sour, which is basically a milk punch. So milk beers, which are usually stouts, have lactose added to them in the process of brewing. So they're a little bit sweet on that back end. So it really complements this cocktail really well. And then the flavors of the whiskey sour, instead of being really harsh and bright and citrusy, they are mellow, soft, but still really, really nice. So the milk kind of mellowed that out, but it then sweetens the beer. And so it's just this great combo. So there is a video that I've posted on the Underground Cooking Club Facebook page on how to prepare the clarified whiskey sour. I will later upload that video directly to the YouTube channel so that you guys don't have to watch it immediately here and you can just go prep. But quite simply, on the smallest ratio possible, if you wanted to do a single clarified whiskey sour, which I think you should do at least 3, but you would use 2 ounces of Irish whiskey, a 3/4 ounce of lemon juice, a 3/4 ounce of simple syrup, mix those together, and then pour that into a single ounce of whole milk. I let mine sit for about an hour in the fridge, and then I end up straining it through my fine mesh sieve that's a part of my pour over coffee pot. All of this will be in the video, and I know it sounds kind of complicated and maybe weird and sciencey, but I promise, super delicious. And then the end product looks like this. Look how clear that is, guys. Let me see. Let me dry that off so you guys can see how clear. Look at that. It almost looks like that's water, or even white wine, because you can see kind of the yellowish tint. Yeah. But so this originally had the same kind of muddy, or not muddy, but murky looking color, because this is same thing, like a simple syrup that's been infused, a citrus, and a whiskey. So it goes from that to this, and then this is shelf stable for like ever. Most people will tell you drink it within 2 weeks, but I have a different cocktail that I've clarified sitting in my fridge that I did last year, and I drank some of it yesterday, and it's fantastic. It still tastes great. So they have a really long shelf life because that clarification process pulls out all of the perishables and makes it shelf stable. So once you prepare this ahead of time based on the recipe in the video, what you'll do is you're going to take 3.5 ounces of your clarified whiskey sour, and I'm going to pour it into this mixing glass. Now, you never want to shake a milk punch or a clarified cocktail, because what will happen is it'll get really, really foamy, and it takes forever to die down. It's really unpleasant, and it kind of just makes all of the effort that you've done pointless. So I'm going to dilute this just a tad because this has no water in it. It's just done and clarified. So I'm going to add a little ice. I have to spill my cocktails over there. And we'll give it a little stir. maybe about 10, maybe 15 seconds, maybe. So most of the time I would stir cocktails longer, but because the clarified punch is kind of a little bit more mellow and flavor, I don't want to over dilute it. So I stirred that. I'll put my strainer in over here. I have a nice double rocks glass. You could use a single rocks glass. I have some bigger fancy cubes. One might do it. We're going to find out. I'm pretty sure I'm going to have to use two. But so I'm going to pour the whiskey sour over my big format ice cube. And you could use any ice. I just really like big ice cubes. We're going to try it over just one. Let's do the two. Make decisions as I go, people. This is what it looks like to be in my brain all the time. Okay, so got those in there. I'm going to add this other ice cube. Perfect. So I have this milk stout. It is a Texas-based one out of Lakewood Brewing. It's called Temptress Imperial Milk Stout. Imperial is just a phrase that's used when it's like really bold and flavorful. It's not necessarily a technique. Milk stout is a technique. And I believe this brand actually makes a couple different ones like s'mores and cinnamon toast crunch and peanut butter. And I'm sure they would also be super, super tasty in this. But we're just using the classic. And you can use your jigger if you want to. You want to pour about a 3/4 ounce, maybe a whole ounce, just kind of depends on where you feel. But you want to pour it slowly directly over the fresh cold ice cube. And it's just going to kind of sit on top like that. And I like to call this loud and clear because it is a very loud beer on top. Well, it didn't layer quite the way I wanted to, but I'll make another one and layer it properly. It does better layering if you have more ice or like the smaller ice cubes. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. Also, my beer is warmed up a little, so it probably needed to cool back down. But either way, if I was to serve this, I would serve it with a stir straw so then you can like mix it around, get that flavor profile. It's really good. Oh my gosh, I don't even know how to explain this cocktail to you guys. It's just good, guys. It's so good. This combination is a banger, as the kids say. It's like this particular milk stout has some notes, like it's definitely got those darker notes that are very traditional in stout, some like chocolatey, coffee, roasted grain type notes. And it's just really playing beautifully with the mellow citrus and the Irish whiskey. Now, I will say your Irish whiskey choice is definitely going to matter. And if I was going to be a gambling woman or a woman that spends a ton of money on whiskey, it's not even that expensive. But my preferred Irish whiskey for this exact recipe would be the Stout Barrel Jameson. It would be like heaven. I didn't happen to have that at home, but I did have Jameson, and it works beautifully. So if you have the Stout Jameson, definitely use that, but make you one of these. If you can't get your hands on a milk stout, just go ahead and use any regular stout. If stouts are a little too much for you, this will work still really well with a porter. I wouldn't go anything lighter than that. But thank you for workshopping cocktails with me, to my colleagues out there, specifically LG, for this fantastic idea. Thank you for coming to my class. And next week, we'll be doing digestifs. So we started off the month with aperitifs, which are cocktails to kind of whet your appetite and get you excited about a meal. And digestifs are the polar opposite, where you drink them after a meal to kind of settle your stomach, help you digest, or in replacement for a dessert. So I'm super excited about those. I hope the puns were not too painful for any of the people out there watching. And if you have any questions whatsoever, please feel free to reach out to me. The recipes get uploaded to the Pandemic Pinup Instagram account. There's more cocktail videos, a ton of content all week long on the Pandemic Pinup TikTok account. And these live stream for free on Facebook every Sunday at 5. And then I upload them later to the YouTube channel for the Chef with Wet Shrews. None of my stuff matches. It's never going to match. So just watch it wherever you want to watch it, guys. This is as good as I get. So thanks for showing up, and I hope you have a great Sunday.